Welcome back to the broadcast. You're watching NTV tonight, this extended version, this Thursday night. On the day, President William Ruto read his second State of the Nation address, addressing a myriad of issues, from cancellation of the deals with Adani for the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and of course the power transmission lines deal, 95 billion worth with Catraco. But there are still questions. We shall try to address some of those. He also talked about the social health insurance, the new system of universal health coverage. Did talk about the economy, saying that we are on our way there. We shall be feeling if that is indeed a fact. Did make another promise on the fight against theft of public funds, detailing a couple of things that he thinks will be done in the next few months. A lot to cover in the next 1 hour, 15 minutes or so. There's also the big debate that has been ongoing of church versus state. President seemingly falling out with the church. We shall be talking quickly about that. I'm joined in studio tonight by CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Kwame Owino, an economist. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Also with us is Professor Marion Mutugi, Commissioner with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Thanks, Prof, for joining us. And Dr. Alphonse Kanga, the Chairperson of the National Council of Churches of Kenya, Nairobi branch. Thanks, Dr. for joining us.
Asante sana.
Let's begin with the biggest talking points from where we sit as news people, and that is, of course, the bombshell or the highlights of the President's State of the Nation address. If I can begin with you, Kwame, the cancellation of the 2 multi-billion shilling deals. Did you expect it? No, I mean, to be honest, I didn't. But of course, government was already under pressure because of the indictments that took place in the US yesterday. So obviously, I didn't, because early in the morning, you heard the reiteration by especially the Minister for Energy, right? Saying that, look, we have done our due diligence and this matter is going. So for the president to pull the carpet from under his feet like that, it was not something that I expected. All right. Are we clear? I mean, Kenya seem to be celebrating. Adani has been trending, especially over the last 24 hours with the indictment in the US. We'll get into details of it and the numbers maybe. But should we be celebrating? Are we out of the woods from where you sit? Yes, I think we should. I mean, even though you could say that the president did this as a part of saving face, we should celebrate the fact that when there's facts and there's evidence that that a counterparty to Kenya has serious ethical questions, then we can't question that, right? We should. But the point is that it tells us as well that those who conduct due diligence, and especially the absence of transparency against these transactions or series of transactions, and there are many more, is a useful thing. The president covered himself, or rather, let me say his officers, by saying that, look, we have a friendly government that has given us evidence that I think he thinks is irrefutable, and for that reason we need to make the big decision, which is interesting by itself, right? But the truth is, I mean, for 6 months, I mean, let's say 3-4 months and more, Kenyans have already known, and the government's counterparts in this decision were people with very shady backgrounds. I mean, truth be said, series of transactions around the world raises. So it's a little bit too late, but it's still better late than never. All right. Prof, this Kenyans have been, the public sentiment has been against Adani for months now. It's starting with a strike by the aviation workers, and then Kenyans being against the deal. The government officers, including cabinet secretaries, putting on a brave face and saying, look, these people are clean. Even the opposition leader, the ODM leader, Raila Odinga, coming publicly and saying that we've done business with these people in the past. They are a good deal. What is your take on today's happenings where the president finally cancelled the deals?
Thank you very much. We first of all want to appreciate the president. He says that he's listening, and it's the role of leaders to listen and to act. So at least we know he's listening, and he's heard what Kenyans have said about Adani. But like Kwame says, it's interesting that he owed the decision to information that came in from friendly nations. And that's good. But I think he needs to go a step further, because if it wasn't about the deal, but about the person himself, we have reason to believe that the same person has other interests, for example, in the Social Health Insurance Fund and in Safaricom. So if the issue is with the person because he's indicted, then I think we still have some way to go.
All right. Daktari, what's your take on this cancellation of the Adani deals by the head of state today?
I think I agree with my colleagues that is a good gesture, is a good thing to do with a lot of question around it. Question one is, how did we get where we are? Our structure's working. When we are told due diligence was done, was it really done? Now that we are here, we say thank you, but the next course of action is, are we going to pay? We remember once there was something like with the dams, and we ended up paying from the taxpayers. Does this mean we are going to pay that money again? Or after cancellation, so what? And then we followed up. What about any other part of interest? Already Kenyans have a perception. And that if we have that kind of a perception, the truth is it'd be difficult to say we proceed with anything else as a country, as a team, with those kind of people. So if it's cancelled, it's cancelled. We say thank you to Egypt for having done that. But now, moving forward is, number one, the perception of Kenyans about that kind of issue has a problem. Is the president listening? Yes, he's listening, and we hope now after this, the next one, we listen to what will happen to NHIF and SHA. We listen to what will happen to housing levy. We listen to what's going to happen to the university. All those things we need to be listening and find out what's the next course of action. So that what we are, there is a book of lamentation. Kenyans have been writing a book of lamentation all through. Now we move from the book of lamentation so that we can start acting. We don't lament by him acting on those things. NHIF and SHA. In our opinion, where we sit, we said, we cannot tell a patient to be patient until 2025. You cannot tell a patient to be patient, to have patience until he gets to the other side of life. So, is he listening? Yes. Let's move on, do the right thing.
All right. Now that you mentioned SHA, we'll talk about whether, because Adani is still in that, but just to some of the numbers to explain to us lay people, Kwame, there's been question of whether there could be some hidden things in the exit clauses of this Adani deals. I mean, it's never easy to walk away from a contract. I did hear one of the members of parliament saying that what the president has done has ended this debate. But has he really? Could there be any hidden charges anywhere?
Well, I think that's a legal question. So the problem with what people are calling these concessions related to the airport and PIP or PPP agreements is there were significant legal questions absent transparency about who's advising government and the obligations that government is taking on behalf of the Kenyan public, and how, of course, that calls for claims, future taxes and payments that have to be made. So that's one. So I don't know whether those agreements, however far they've gone, because they've not been disclosed, whether it is possible for the government to unilaterally say, look, we walk back. I'm not too sure that that's possible. So that'll be a legal question. And I'm sure because of the nature of these transactions, whoever it is who's the counterparty definitely has lawyers advising them. And they'd have considered and actually tried to cover their tracks in that way. So there might be, it might be difficult to extricate the country from it without a penalty. I suspect that is going to happen. So I don't know that a presidential declaration is enough to actually repudiate a contract. I don't know that that's true. That's possible. But the problem with these, what we are calling the concessions, be they the one for SHA, be they the airport, or the transaction regarding Ketraco, are not just that they are clouded in darkness. They're actually very bad economics based on the transactions themselves. So if you talk about this, the 30-year deal, whoever it is coming, has access to the property which belongs to Kenyans, and at the same time has 18% claims, has access to land, right, to construct things and all that.
Right.
So basically they have no skin in the game, and all liabilities lie with Kenya. So that in itself is the bad thing. So regardless of what the legal position will be, I think to extricate the country from this very bad economics is something that you might say, well, for good or bad, the president probably through pressure, definitely, because he's been quiet all along, through pressure has had to concede. And that's a positive. Let's pocket that and move.
So the president said that we will be onboarding new partners. You say these deals, the way they have been crafted, are bad. So what should the government do in terms of, remodeling the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport? And of course, they say that our transmission lines, we are almost 10 years behind in terms of, and that's the cause of the regular blackouts that we have. So what's the best way forward?
Whatever language you use, this idea is not new. The SGR, which is a disaster, a walking disaster, and we could have told a few years ago, they have a certain thing in common. The belief or coming out from something that we cannot all deny, that better infrastructure is something all Kenyans seek. And then on that basis, you go into an exclusive argument with one firm, basically, without competition. So without competition and the declaration of the terms of the agreement, you know everything will go wrong like this has happened. So the lesson, and I wish Parliament could insist on it, instead of just applauding like little kids applauding a headmaster at the parade, one of the first things they should insist is, what do we learn about what laws we can pass to ensure that there's no repeat or something like this? That you can actually have an agreement given to Kenya, if what the press says is they have an agreement given to a board in the morning, right? Several hundred pages, and then in the afternoon it's already been approved, and it's $800 million of taxpayers' money has been committed. I think that kind of speed is obviously does not suggest good faith. Right. So unless we fix that, and I'm thinking here, there's scope to use a legal instrument. So it's not enough for parliamentarians to say we applaud. You should say, how do we make sure that there are transparency assessments? That's one. And two, that the assessment of the technical fitness by professionals, even Parliament itself seeking different professionals, should be. Without that, we'll just be postponing this and of course kicking it out to another dark arrangement, certain lawyers, certain places, and then we'll have another agreement that will bring grief to Kenyans again.
All right. Prof, since June 25th, when there was the Gen Z protests, the day Parliament was breached, there has been a lack of trust between especially young Kenyans and the government. And young Kenyans have seemingly opposed almost every government decision. Do you think, with everybody agreeing that we need to upgrade our infrastructure, like the airports and the transmission power lines, do you believe there can be some kind of consensus between the government and its plans and the people and how they understand how the government plans to do things?
The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, at the beginning of the Gen Z protests, said that there is widespread anger, mistrust, anxiety among Kenyans. And the anti-finance bill was just a manifestation. It wasn't it. And this is the crux of the matter. That unfortunately, with this kind of lack of trust and anxiety and anger, even a very, very good project cannot be viewed objectively because we are mistrusting the government. And so I think it's not just about the young people. Maybe the young people have just found their way of ventilating in a manner that is different from the older folk. But I think what is important right now is for the Ruto administration to, we're happy they say they are listening, but let them think through what is the source of this mistrust? How did it start? Where did the rain start beating us? They came in on a platform of overwhelming support. What went wrong? Why? Where? And then put in strategies and measures to regain that trust. Because whether it is the Ketraco, whether it is the airport, whether it is sheaf, whether it is housing, whether it is fertilizer. There's always issues that people have with it. And unfortunately, at times, we are not even able to objectively look at the situations and analyze this. And it is not for lack of expertise. Kenyans are very educated. We have technical people. Our CSs, if you look at their CVs, they are outstanding. The advisors that are in government are many, well-educated, internationally renowned. So what is the problem? And if the administration can be able to answer that question, then maybe we can rebuild trust so that we can be able to look at things objectively, so that the information that they give us, we can believe it.
All right. Sorry, on this, in the same breath, the clergy and the political class have been accused of not saying enough in terms of these Adani deals, that Kenyans are the ones who've been on their own. I won't ask you about the politicians, but do you think the church has said or done enough in this particular issue, on this particular issue?
There is nothing the church have not said. Mm-hmm. The church have released statements from different direction. But before I answer that, picking from where the Prof has just left, is that there is something in Kenya we call honesty. Honesty with ourselves, honesty with our neighbors, and honesty is something missing within our culture. And then Kenya is a small village. It's a small book that all of us can read. So when you come up with some dishonest issues in the public, people are able to see beyond what you are talking about. And that is why there is a lot of mistrust all over. And this honesty can even be picked up by high school children. It can be picked up by university professors, can be picked up by farmers, mama mboga. Where there's this dishonesty, you'll always have this kind of a thing. Is the church speaking enough? Well, how enough is the church supposed to be enough? The church is very much aware, number one, is that in every structured operation, there must be the king, there must be the judiciary, and there must be the prophet. And if the prophet will not speak on behalf of those who cannot speak, then there'll be a problem. And so is the prophet doing her work? Yes. And let's put it clear. There is this perception that the church is against an individual. No church will be against an individual. No church will be against the head of state. No church will be against a particular minister or worker. But the church has a specific standards, the way they operate. They have a calling, and the calling is to make sure they speak on behalf of wananchi. Wananchi belongs to us. We serve God and man. So as we serve man, we are serving God. Right. And so when something happens, do we speak enough? Yes, we speak, and speak it again. The question is, are you listening?
Good question. And we'll get into that a bit more. We'll get into the issue of the church and the state and the relationship that seems to have broken down. But let's take a quick commercial break and pay a couple of bills real quick. When we come back, we'll talk about the economy, corruption, and of course that UHC program called SHA that has got Kenyans, talking and debating. Don't go too far. Stay with us.
Do not miss Food, Packaging and Hospitality Expo 2024. Connect with companies from over 20 countries. Meet local suppliers, manufacturers, government buyers, hoteliers, and other industry professionals at Sarit Expo Center from 20 to 22 November, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
San Francisco.
The best players in the world.
It's the most beautiful thing you could ever witness.
Welcome to the official start of All-Star Weekend, an NBA All-Star Celebrity Game. Let's go, baby! Stars, yes, feature here on display. The lights are on, the stars are here.
Yes. Tarehe 4
On 4th
hadi tarehe 15
up to 15th of December.
mwezi wa 12, Mungu anatupa nguvu kupitia kwa damu na mwili wa mwanawe.
Welcome back to NTV Tonight. I have with me in studio Kwame Owino, the CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA. We also have Professor Marion Mutugi from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and Dr. Alphonse Kanga from the National Council of Churches of Kenya. Before we move away from the Adani issue, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to speak about lack of coordination we've seen in government concerning this Adani issue. We've seen, like we mentioned before, Kwame, just today, before the Standing Senate Committee on Energy, the CS of Energy, Opio and I, did say that despite the indictment of Adani in the US, the deal, the Catraco deal, would definitely go through. Then a few hours later, we have the president cancelling it. We've also had the transport CS, Davis Chirchis, tell again in Parliament that the Adani are clean. We've had Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, again say the Adani deal is clean. But then we see after a couple of months and weeks, it's been cancelled. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think we can reach any good conclusion. So the first thing it tells you is that what's the quality of Kenya's due diligence when you're dealing with very high risk transactions such as this, and some of them are for very long periods, 30 years for the airport, for instance. So it tells you that no good work was done here, right? To be able to find, because at the most you'd have expected somebody to say that we dispute what, for instance, a court in another place has done. But you're saying we are not disputing it, but we are going ahead. In other words, it doesn't matter to us. In my view, the cabinet secretaries who said one thing and then the president said another, I think their professional standing comes to question. And if they are honest men, especially because these are two men, they would have no choice but to ask their boss to relieve them of their duties. Especially because their boss made a very emphatic view that, look, we do not intend to ever support corruption. And if we have counterparties who are trying to flow corruption into our country, we are not going to allow it. So when in the morning they are saying something and their boss is that emphatic about the fact that they're fighting corruption, then they have a different view from their boss and they'd have to defer to him by leaving those jobs. I mean, if they're worth their honesty and their honor. But I doubt that that's what they'll do. But in the whole, it just tells you that they just say stuff because they do not expect to have to take responsibility for whatever they say, or perhaps have an interest in a transaction going on regardless of what consequences it would have for Kenyans. But it's just in the space of less than 12 hours. I mean, that level of, if I may call it contradiction or absence of agreement, just tells you that a good number of the people who sit with the president in cabinet are not helping his image, his credibility, and generating public trust, which this administration needs desperately.
Prof, what do you say?
Thank you. The Constitution places a very high bar on state officers. It says that they should behave in a manner that elicits confidence. Now, Kwame has brought one side of the coin, that did they do enough due diligence? But there is also the question, could it be possible that they probably told whoever needed to make the decision, gave them a professional view and it was ignored? Could it be that they are not able to do that? Maybe They are operating in an environment of groupthink where they wait for the boss to talk and then they parrot it. So there are many permutations of what may have happened. But I totally agree that with Kwame that in whatever reason, whatever transpired, somebody must take responsibility. And that responsibility is that who dropped the ball? Who did not do due diligence? Who did not say it? Or who said it and it wasn't heard? They should come out and tell us, like the former AG told us. I give my opinion, it's not taken. He lost his job. But he got another one. So I think it boils down to the question of integrity. And we have a whole chapter on integrity in our constitution, but we have not been serious about it. So let somebody take responsibility, or, well, it will just be a different project and a different Adani, and we'll be back to square one. And we will continue with the cycle, and we will continue to lose trust in the government. You know, it must be very, very frustrating. I can imagine a father whose children have lost trust in him, how he would run that home. You know, he talks and they look at him and they say, tell that to the birds. So it must be very frustrating for the presidency and for the government, for the electorate and the citizens to lose trust in them. And really, that's the crux of the matter. What happened?
Dr. Hari, any lessons the president, government can draw from all this?
Immediately this thing happened, I saw the minister speak. And then my question was, has the minister consulted? Have they sat together and decided the next course of action? Or you have been asked and you talk about it? Where you work, there is something we call, simple English, practice and procedure, which means what you do and how you do it. What do we do and how we do it? So from my system, when we want to do it, we agree. And then we say, okay, chair, now speak it out. Because we have all agreed. And I'll expect the government to work within that process. There is a process you take before you make a serious decision that's concerning the whole nation. The minister should know that when he speaks, he's speaking the whole nation. He's not speaking about himself. And he's not just speaking to those few people that are there, he's speaking to everybody. And so for him to say that, then after a few minutes, the president says something, and then he turns around and says, yes. Now, what perception do we have about him? I think we just need to shape up and say no. So which lesson do we learn? There is a practice and procedure that need to be introduced within our system. And the people that advise, I would say that the president is advised from bottom up. So that what's happening on the ground, he gets, like what you have said. You have come up with a number of issues. You said this was false, this was false. Then I'm wondering, when you say this was false, the president is one, is our father, is the head of state. And we expect to give him the right thing, the right information. So when he says, and then we say it was false, where are we left as children? Where are we left as a nation? Like this gentleman who said, no, we'll continue. And then the head of state says, we are not going to continue. He said, yes. What do you want us to say? Are you in the system or in an outside system? Please stick to a particular practice that will help us move forward as a united nation.
All right.
Not individuals speaking what they want.
All right, let's get away from Adani. It's a topic that we can talk about for hours. Let's talk about the economy now. The state of the economy is something we have had discussions over the last few days, and the president painted a rosy picture on one hand, and of course did say that there have been challenges over the numbers in terms of what economists are telling him, and Kenyans saying that they do not have money in their pockets. Some of the highlights from that was that the shilling has appreciated from 162 against the US dollar, that was in February this year, to around 129 shillings against the US dollar. That's a 20% gain. Now that's a fact. Inflation dropped from 9.6%, that's in September 2022, to 2.7 in October 2024. That is the lowest in about 17 years. Stock also highlighted foreign exchange reserves increasing by $2.4 billion US dollars. That is covering 4.8 months of imports, saying that that's the highest in 10 years. Tax revenues growing by 11.5%. And of course, this the economy recorded 5.6 GDP growth in 2023, Kwame, saying this among the highest globally. And there's a projected growth of 5% in 2024 and 5.6 in 2025. First of all, do these numbers make sense to you as an economist?
Yes, I think, to be honest, I mean, those numbers are correct. The inflation numbers, the growth forecasts seem to be correct. The inflation number, obviously, the lowest in 16, 17 years, that too is correct. The shilling against, the shilling's value in February against today, so it's true, it's a 20% gain. The unfortunate thing is that these numbers by themselves tell you very little. In fact, as Kenyans know, it tells you nothing about when you go to shops, and it doesn't tell you much about the fact that in that same period that he's speaking about, very little has grown in terms of people's incomes. So that's how people materially live. So the inflation number on itself, especially for 1 month, it's not for the whole year, it's 2.7, by itself doesn't just tell you a lot, to be honest. So in cherry-picking numbers, you can give that impression that it's a bit of that things are doing well. However, the things that the president could have stressed, which would tell us things, is whether how much growth has taken place in private incomes. That hasn't said. How much growth has taken place in the number of jobs being created. Real private sector jobs would be useful. That would be useful. I mean, that would be a useful way to speak about it. On the other things for which the president is taking, or seems to be suggesting a bellwether, in the sense that they suggest how the economy is going, I think he needs to be very careful, because inflation numbers could go up if there's a global crisis, for instance. And if it happens, it can happen just by accident tomorrow, because a certain person in one part of the world gets aggressive, oil prices start to push back, and then what happens? Will he now say that we should hold him responsible for that? So they're mentioning to us figures over which really they don't have much control. And when they cite numbers such as the shilling's exchange rate today, when a global shock happens and the shilling starts to depreciate, as will definitely happen, you can take this on the record, they will start to, will they say now that they're still responsible for that? But as I conclude, what are the things that people care about? Fuel, for instance. So in the same numbers that you've told us about inflation for the month, comparing 2022 September, 2019 September, 2024 September to 2023 September, because it measures similar periods, it's definitely lower. But the price of fuel per liter today, right, premium is still higher than it was in 2022. So it fails to take account of the fact that the momentum was moving forward, and when it changes, just because inflation is going down does not mean goods have become cheaper. I think he mentioned a few other things as well regarding sugarcane, which is true. In sugar production by Kenya's factories in July was, I think, 84,000 tons. It's one of the highest in a very, very long time. That's true, but that was a seasonal question. We had very, very good rains, and therefore that seasonal bump is here. Suggesting that Kenya may have surpluses to actually start to export sugar, untrue, because Kenya has always had sugar exports, but a very, very small amount. So if you compare exports to imports, the amount of imports actually is like 100 times. I mean, exports are actually less than 10% of the imports. So that number, comparing those numbers by itself requires that context. So it's a mixed picture. And if I was the president, maybe what should have stated is, there are few things that are suggesting to us that they're moving in the right direction, but we need a lot more things to move in the right direction. So we hear you, Kenyans. And that uncertainty is what public policy should resolve. But to suggest that you're already out of the woods, I think is to overstate it.
All right. Prof, having heard all that, and in your work you deal with people and their rights, and the president is admitting that the economy, the numbers seem to be indicating it is growing, but people are not feeling money in their pockets. I heard the Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi saying that putting money in people's pocket is not dash, a 100 meters dash. It's a marathon. What do you hear from the ground when Kenyans speak?
Thank you. To start with, I think there was a contradiction, because the impression that the economy is doing well and we have improved was there. And yet in the president's speech, he acknowledged that Kenyans are facing unprecedented pain, struggle, and hardship, and they can hardly make ends meet. So if the economy is improving and is doing well, how come we are facing hardship? But, you know, not of the 50 plus million Kenyans, not many of them can understand these figures, even us who have gone to school quite a bit, unless we are people like Kwame who have done economics. We don't really understand these things, but we can see there is a disconnect between the conclusion from the figures and what we experience on the ground. Question: how many of you have gone to your village and found that there are people who are not making ends meet? Personally, I am getting people ask me for help who have never asked me for help. The land they have is the same. We have had a bumper harvest. There's been rains and so forth. There are people who have come, and there are people who are struggling to make livelihoods. And that's what the Gen Z were saying. They were saying, look here, we've gone to school. We don't have jobs. And those of us who have jobs, we cannot make ends meet. The Constitution says that it is a human right for us to live in dignity. No, how do fathers feel when you come home with no unga? And then we are surprised when we have increase in domestic violence.
Yes.
So how does a father feel? It must be very frustrating to come home without food on the table, and the wife asks you and the children are crying, and you went out, you got money, but that money is not enough. So there is a disconnect between the figures, the inferences that he concluded, and what we are seeing on the ground. How many of us go to the supermarket, buy the same things that we have always bought, and yet when we get to the till, we are asked to pay 50, 100% more than we did in the past? That's where the rubber meets the road. Kenyans are not doing well. The president was right. We are facing unprecedented hardships. There is pain, and he was right saying that we are not making ends meet.
All right. So we are looking at this President's State of the Nation address from all angles as much as we can. From where you sit, from your flocks and what you hear, what is your view from that point?
First of all, I agree that Kenyans are feeling some pain from different corners. But one of the things that I like from the president's economic speech is he has a lot of hope, and he has a winning attitude. He has an attitude to win, and he's encouraging us to have hope that things are going to work. So to me, first of all, I'll ask the economy who is here. There are things that seem to have happened just within a month, and they have not been happening. Now, if it happened within a month, and then we bank on that, are we sure it will continue happening, or something can change within a minute? But all the same, what I can see as a layman as far as the economy is concerned, the head of state was trying to give us hope and a winning attitude that we are going to make it. The only thing we can turn around and say, now we that work within our country, can we be able just to come down and say, what are the things that makes us not to do the right thing for our economy to improve? What makes us fight 24/7? What makes us quarrel 24/7 until we hinder the economy from moving? Simple things. Housing, that we have not agreed on the way forward. Simple thing, like education. We have not agreed on what to do with education. Simple things, again, a number of issues that we have not agreed. If only we can agree together and say, this is the way forward. The agenda is on the table, we agree, and then we go the right direction. Like from our perspective, we said, oh, this issue of SHA is a challenge. The president has a very bright idea, good idea. But because it's a challenge, we have fundraising every day on WhatsApp and we are barring people. Can we relax a little bit, either go back to NHIF and then sit together and say, now let's move back to SHA when things are all right. As I've said before, you cannot tell a patient to be patient until 2025, or between now and 2025, he might have gone to where he came from. And so those are the things that makes people get frustrated. So when you speak, people are prejudiced. When you speak, people are already, they can't see it. But if we deal with these challenges that are facing us as individuals, and if the people that are at work within the government do their groundwork well, then the head of state will not be this kind of situation where he says and we say, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
I don't think the president means bad. He means good. But how do we support him? Or how do we come up? For example, simple thing. We have talked to the issue of land, the issue of affordable housing. It has been talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. But a simple question has come up. It has been there. How do you build a house on a public land and then you sell it to me? The person will come in 2020, 2030. Is it possible he can turn around and deny me that land? What will happen? Why don't we deal with those small issues and then we go together as a nation?
All right. The next thing is closely linked with the economy, and that is one of the president's flagship project, that is the universal health coverage, SHA, the Social Health Authority. And today we had a bit of rebranding where the president referred to it as Taifa Care. What is your, very quickly, Kwame, what is your scorecard of SHA generally?
Okay, I mean, thanks to the fact that I haven't been unwell, so I haven't got an opportunity to use it. But you see feedback from people who even lost lives because they were unable to receive, to get services out of that. So giving it a new name is like just basically coming up with a flashy name is just communicating it differently. But if you're communicating a bad idea by just giving it a good name, I'm not too sure that's going to solve. I'd have expected, for instance, a claim that, look, the major problem has been portability. Of course, the president says, look, some things are getting better, we expect a few months and all that. But many people who go out there today say that if you get unwell and they're not picking when to be unwell, you go to hospitals and they're telling you, we are not going to receive that payment. Indeed, we are owed arrears, which the president says is going to be paid up in the next 1 month or so.
So does the fundamental economic principle for SHA make sense to you?
It doesn't. SHA never made sense to me, because I think the president mentioned it as well, and here perhaps the SHA should be discussed itself, and Kenyans have had an earful of it, but I'll say this. Look, the NHIF, which is supposed to be the predecessor for SHA, had very serious problems. And one of those, of course, was not just the question about fraud, late payments. There are serious inefficiencies, including how much was being spent on administration vis-a-vis out there. So there are really, really serious things that in. The portability to SHA seems to have suggested to me that the problem was a technology problem, which you buy from that Indian farm, and then you charge people more money. So it looks like they're thinking that the fix for it is basically more money and a problem with more cash. Mm-hmm. Now, if you put more money in a leaking bucket, you're going to see what some of the stuff that's going to happen. So I am not persuaded that the problems with the efficiency that SHA has, that was supposed to be solved, are going to be solved. So you can give it a new name and call it Taifa Care, right? Or whatever it is. But if you haven't solved the fundamental questions of efficiency and the fraud, massive fraud that was taking place out there, and the fact that eventually it became a system that was transferring resources away from the public sector hospitals to private hospitals, then you know that simply adding more money is to simply actually enrich private hospitals and to undermine public health care. So no, this is, my view, is not consistent with defending the public access to services, and I don't expect it to.
Prof, you've mentioned the number of people that would ask for help compared to what would happen in the past. And one of the major things that SHA was supposed to, or the UHC program was supposed to cure, is to make healthcare affordable to everybody, even those in the lower spectrum, economically speaking, so that we of fundraising.
You can possibly surmise.
We will hack this.
If something is working, but not working well, even if it's just working 40%, it's performing well, I would imagine that the very best approach would be to take that which is working at 40% and improve it by identifying what is not working, not to scrape it and start a whole new one. Now, looking at SHA, I think the government is successful in what they planned to do. They are successful in getting more money because SHA is giving more money to government. The model shows that I was paying 500 shillings, 300 shillings. Now it is a percentage of my salary. So the government is collecting more money for that program. So if that was the goal, they are accomplishing it. If the goal was access and service provision and the Mwananchi getting the highest attainable standards of health, no, it is not. However, this is an opportunity for a master student who wants to do a project to work on a project in public health or in health systems. Just go around and take mortality data since SHA was enacted and tell us on a month to month, for example, October, September, October 2024 vis-a-vis October 2023, month on month, year on year. What were the mortalities? Who died? Out of what? Where? This is a super project because I can say without fear of contradiction that we shall see that, like Dr. Kanga is saying, it doesn't really matter whether there is universal health care or not, or whether it's called Taifa Care or not. If I need drugs, if I need dialysis, I need dialysis and I must get it now. And there are people who are not getting it. I know that there has been a major problem of integration. There are people who had paid their dues on NHIF. I know of somebody who had paid up to April next year. But now when they went into hospital, they were told there is no integration and they have to pay SHA afresh for the whole year. So there are those access issues. And as Kwame says, maybe we do not understand their goal. But if their goal was making money, yes, they are making it.
All right. Interesting views there. Now, yes, and as you do this, tell me this. One of the issues that we've seen with SHA is payment of claims, especially by private hospitals and faith-based hospitals. The president today made a commitment that the October claims will be made by next week, and saying that 5.5 billion to faith-based healthcare facilities have been released. What is your general overview on how this is working?
You know, if you live where we live as priests on the crossroad where there are people, if you do what I do, that part of my responsibility is to comfort and bury people. You don't need to be a PhD student to know that I buried more people than I have buried before. And especially when you bury somebody and then you are thinking, if this was like this, then I will not have buried this one. You'll react. For example, if you realize that because of the complication of SHA, this person is not able to access medication, and so I'm burying tomorrow. But if NHIF was in place, we would have saved this life. And then the danger with SHA is that this thing is not well explained. This thing is understood by very few people. A number of us, with all how much we have gone to school, we are not able to comprehend what the whole thing is all about. What we know is that he has not been treated, he wanted to be treated, and there is no money, there is a confusion, and he has died, we have buried. Now, what would you say if you are a priest? You will say, please, stop for the time being, let's not bury this lady so that we can save her life and then come this side, if it's going to work. And then Shah, if it is true that Shah was part of the Adani scheme, then it brings a lot of confusion. And then there is the issue of honesty. If it is true that we have lost 11 billion in the other agenda, in the housing project, and here you are talking about Shah, it brings a lot of confusion. For we to trust it will be difficult. But please, 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 let us sit together and agree on what happens here. Let's not just push and say, it must go on, it must go on. Let's save lives. Even if it means going back to NHIF. NCCK, we have said and said, let's go back to NHIF, save those few lives, and then organize Shah.
Okay.
I thought we were smarter than that.
Let's take a quick commercial break. The president says this is an ambitious healthcare plan and we are committed to make sure it works. There are a few challenges and we will address them. That is the president's promise to Kenyans. When we come back after this quick commercial break, we will have the final round of issues. We'll take a look at the state of human rights as well as the relationship between church and state. Stay with us.
Do not miss Food, Packaging and Hospitality Expo 2024. Connect with companies from over 20 countries. Meet local suppliers, manufacturers, government buyers, hoteliers, and other industry professionals at Sarit Expo Center from 20 to 22 November, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Hey, ungependa kuwa mshindi na Lucky Box? Ni rahisi sana.
Bonyeza *463# uwe mshindi.
Kuna vitu vingi sana vya kushinda.
Kama vile TV, kuka, washing machine, fridge, kipiki, pesa na hata gari. Na sio gari tu, Subaru.
Na kuna jackpots kadha wa kadha. Kuna power jackpot ya 1.9 million.
Mega jackpot 2.5 million.
Na super Sunday ya 3 million Kenya shillings. Kila mtu anaweza kuwa mshindi. Bonyeza *463#. Uwe mshindi.
Kuchagua box ni kuchagua chapa.
Kumbuka, kila unapocheza Lucky Box unasaidia watoto kusoma.
Welcome back to NTV tonight, back for the final round in our discussion as we take stock and pulse of the nation following the second State of the Nation address by President William Ruto. I want us to take a look in the next 6 minutes or so at the state of human rights. And yesterday we had a couple of organizations that deal with this on a daily basis release some statistics with all of them saying that things are worse now in terms of state human rights than they were in 2022. Commission, that is the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, saying in the last 5 years a total of 6 deaths, 610 injuries, 1,300 arbitrary arrests, which is something we have reported quite a lot over the past few months, including yesterday with the abduction and transfer of opposition leader in Uganda, that is Dr. Chiza Besigye, abducted right here in Kenya. And let me start with you, Prof. The picture looks pretty dark. Kindly paint it for us and where we are going, as we had the president, rubbishing some of the reports, saying some people were said to be abducted. It was found out they were later. It was later found out that they were arrested. And of course, we've seen I think around 29 people still unaccounted for. How does the picture look?
Let us give credit where it's due. The president said, I must, however, make it very clear that there is no attempt to justify or excuse illegal arrest, which would be serious threats to the life and liberty of citizens. He acknowledged that there are occasions where there were illegal arrests or abductions or enforced disappearance. He acknowledged that there are cases where there was loss of property and loss of lives. So for the very first time, he acknowledged this. For the very first time, the Inspector General also acknowledged and gave figures, and we want to applaud them for that acknowledgement. Having said that, yes, yesterday, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights gave their annual report on the state of human rights in the country, and we stand by our statement that we have given to the reporting through our reporting system. We've given it to Parliament, we have given it to who we are supposed to report to. We know, and we have recommended, we have recorded 60 deaths related to the protests. We have recorded 74 abductions and enforced disappearances. We have names, we have places, we have clips, we have photographs. We said that we know that there are 26 people who are still missing, including an elected member of the County Assembly of Wajir. Those are facts. Those are facts. If there are some who have been reported missing and they have reappeared, very good, we thank God for that. If there are some who were reported to have been abducted or disappeared and they appear in court, well done. But the truth of the matter is that they are abductions. But even more serious is the idea that Parliament, people ask us and government asks us, how do you know that it's police who are abducting these people? I say, oh, if it's police, it's better. At least we know who it is. It's even more serious for me to imagine there are people who are roaming the streets of Nairobi, the streets of cities and towns, who can abduct others in plain sight with impunity, and the police does not know them. The police is helpless. Actually, it is even more serious to imagine that foreigners who have come to Kenya, people from Ethiopia, people from Turkey, people from Somalia, people from India, people from Pakistan, and most lately somebody from Uganda, Besigye, can be abducted. I mean, he's just missing. And the next thing we hear, he appears in Uganda. That is really very serious. It shows a breakdown in our security system. It shows that the government has we give them our taxes, they have intelligence, they have the security organs, and they cannot help or tell us who is abducting who. Actually, we are living in fear. If it can happen to an elected member, if it can happen to a foreigner, what chance do I stand?
All right. Dr. We've heard this since June when the Gen Z protests began. From where you sit, I think it's getting better or worse?
We are not sure that they are getting better because, one, as a church, we believe in professional operations. When they sit down and these teams sit down and tell us this is what's happening, and we're on the crossroad, we can tell you that we buried so and so, we were in this burial and this has happened. We cannot say no. The only danger where we are people who are trying to play a game of being better than others. No Kenyan is better than the other Kenyan. Let's just say the truth and say this is where the truth is, and let's solve our issues. Are things getting better or worse? They are not getting better, especially based on what she has just said and what we heard the security personnel say, that it's possible they are not the ones who did that to Besigye. The gentleman went to Uganda and they didn't know, and that's absurd. You cannot imagine that somebody will come through the entry point, come to Nairobi, get somewhere in Lavington, pick somebody, go through the same system unless he flew by the Holy something, not the Holy Spirit, but he flew somewhere. Because we have Jeshi Angani, we have all the systems in place, then the DCI should go home. Because we just did, but why should he go home? Definitely he knows, because we pay him and the system is paid for. So let's not also mess up the whole system or paint the image of the government look bad by virtue of either trying to be good or manipulating others because we don't understand. Kenyans are above a point of manipulation.
All right.
Are things getting better or worse? We cannot say they are getting better unless otherwise, because we have the numbers. By the way, Professor's team and our team, we don't speak from the air. Before we speak, we are professionals who go on the ground and bring us information. Then we speak it out.
Right.
Plus the conviction we have in God.
All right.
Yeah.
Kwame, we've heard the government say that there were issues of arrests following the Gen Z protests, and then there are now criminal elements who are taking advantage of that. What's your take on all this?
I don't know. I mean, the point for me is this. I was a college student when this clamor for multi-party, for a new constitution came in. And one of the biggest fears was how Kenyans would disappear into these rabbit holes and never be found again. So one of the things that actually went to having such a strong Bill of Rights in Kenya's constitution, one of the very strongest in the neighborhood, is just because of that. One of the things that I think Kenya's leadership, starting from the president perhaps and all his colleagues and the Kenyan police hate, is to be lectured by foreigners about how to enforce law in Kenya. Mm-hmm. And if people are disappearing and all we can say, it's embarrassing to say because it's the same language that we had, that tell us the evidence that somebody is missing. When somebody is declared missing, it suddenly becomes a police case almost immediately. So what I expected was to say 29 were reported to us by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, right? We have resolved this number and these are still up there. But that casual way, in my view, suggests that this is being managed as a public communication and deny. It wasn't a good thing. And those lectures are going to return and people are going to be agitated here about how people from abroad who do not understand Kenya should be lecturing us and lecturing our leaders. So if they want to take this more seriously, I think that part requires a little bit more of reconsideration. The idea of just a denial is not going to work. And to tell Kenyans to do the work of the police by bringing the evidence themselves is in itself also quite absurd.
All right.
Ken, may I just add to that and say, it is true that there are opportunistic criminals who may have infiltrated the protesters. But telling us that they were there does not justify. Actually, you should deal with them. It's your job to deal with them and to ensure they are not infiltrating the protesters.
That's why we pay them.
So that's why we pay you, thank you, Bishop. That's why we pay them. So telling us that the protesters are doing a good job and they have the constitutional right, but they were infiltrated, where were you when they were infiltrated?
Good questions, and we'll keep covering this.
And who are these people who infiltrated? How have they stood
Have they been
court?
Identified?
Yes.
Or arraigned? We'll keep covering. We have been covering this quite a lot. The issue of abductions and forced disappearances. We have 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, to run this up, and I want us to talk about something that was not part of the State of the Nation, but has been an integral part of Kenya as a constitutional democracy, and that is the place of the church and its relationship with government. Actually, if I can begin with you, you're the main protagonist in this, on this forum. Has the relationship between church and state completely broken down, or is this a normal and healthy relationship in a democracy?
To me, I'll not even say it has gone anywhere. The relationship of the church and state is still strong. Why? From the beginning, the church and state work like two sisters working together for the betterment of mankind. We work together. The church is not the head of the state, and the state is not the head of the church. The head of the church is God, is Jesus himself. But we work together with the government on a daily basis for betterment of mankind, and we respect one another. But the church must do her work. So when people say there is an issue with the church and state, there is no issue with the church and state. What's happening is just simple. The church is busy doing her work of communicating and speaking to Wanjiku down there to make sure Wanjiku is safe and making sure that Wanjiku gets justice. And the church will speak despite the fact that she might go against the will of a particular mindset, the will of a political mindset. The church cannot turn around and say, no, we are going to speak the mindset of a politician. But the church will speak from the scripture, and she must speak so that justice can be found down there on the grassroots, who are our clients.
All right.
So no problem.
No problem at all. Prof, what's your take on recent developments and what Kenyans have been saying about church and state?
Well, there was some mistrust, we must confess, that as we came into this government, this administration came into play, there was a belief that the church, whoever the church is, whether it is individuals, leaders in the church, probably specific individuals, actively or passively encouraged and campaigned for this administration. And that perception persisted, and it is believed, whether true or not, there is a perception that when things started going wrong, the church did not come out as strongly as, say, during the Second Liberation or during the clamor for the new constitution. Having said all this, however, we as the commission, we work very closely with the church. They are one of our major stakeholders. Religious leaders, be they Christians, be they Muslims, be they Hindus, because we recognize that of all institutions, of all sectors, they have the widest reach to the grassroots. Not even the chief has the information that the priest has or the pastor has. The congregant goes to confess to the priest, not to the chief. And so these religious leaders interact with the members of the grassroots a minimum of once a week, many times even more than once a week. And therefore they have accurate, timely, real-time information. And when they come out and they talk, if I were in the current administration or any government, I would work very, very closely with the church, because the information they have, the intelligence they have would benefit me without me paying for it. So let us take the church for who they are.
All right.
They have a wide reach, they have credible information, they have real-time information.
Thank you.
Ken, a quick one.
30 seconds to
A
respond
quick
to that.
one. There is a concept of what the church is. There is the church organized and the church individual. Those are two different things together. The church organized, we work with the minutes and structures and the scripture. The church individual, an individual will go around a game and say something, and that's not the church. The church, from where I come from, the church is one. The church is Catholic, is apostolic.
Right.
It is one. It is there for preaching, and it cannot be moved by an individual who will do something, then it's named the church. The church organized and the church individual, those are two different things altogether.
Thank you.
Bishop, I'm well informed.
Kwame, have the final say in this. And you said you were in school when there was clamor for constitutional change. And how do you compare the state of the relationship between church and state now and the times of the David Gitaris and Dengi Mwana Nzekis and such?
Okay, I haven't studied that, but let me tell you this. Sometime in July this year, the church that the congregation that I sit in had a very disappointed priest lifting bullets, rather cartridges, and showing us that policemen shot inside the sanctuary itself. And many people had disappointment by saying, this is an administration we prayed for, we didn't know they would treat us like this, or they would behave like this. So I'm not too sure what the newfound revelation has been to the church, but I have myself seen video clips and sat with people who actually sit in congregations which say, we prayed for this administration. We brought them in force. We asked our congregations to support them, and look at what they've done. So I think, to be honest, And if you look at the Gen Zs, many of them were going to protest in the church, and their view was that the church had taken a very biased view about national events based on the fact that they were trying to be pleasant to an existing administration. Not necessarily this, but perhaps even the past ones. So I think there's a new reckoning, partly driven by congregations which are unwilling to accept some pussyfooting or the view that churches should try very, very much to please politicians. And so there's a reawakening. I think these are cycles, I suspect, and maybe it's a new thing that's come up here. But the truth is, there's a feeling among Kenyans that churches over the last few years have pussyfooted around national things. And so whenever we had protests, for instance, they'd say that the opposition should behave themselves until these guys started shooting in churches. Then we realized, okay, this threat could actually go either way.
All right. On that bombshell, let's leave it there. Lady and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to try and help us unpack the State of the Nation Address. Kwame Owino, CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Professor Marion Mutugi, Commissioner of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and Dr. Alphonse Kanga, the Chairperson, National Council of Churches of Kenya, Nairobi branch. Many thanks for joining us tonight. That's where we leave it. We continue to keep an eye on this and make sense of what's happening with the issues that were addressed by the president today in the coming days here on the Nation Media Group's platforms. For all of us on the broadcast, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for watching. I am Ben Kitili. Good night from Nairobi.